Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 222 for Monday, December 5th, 2022. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is the transformative Pixelriffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, yes, speaking of Transformers, we've been talking a lot about Transformers and Joel's continuing adventures in LEGO with the Back to the Future LEGO set, the DeLorean, looking splendid so far, and looking forward to seeing more of that on your LEGO Let's Chats. In the meantime, if you want to hear more of us chatting, you can get the extended conversation where we talk about all of this stuff from patreon.com/thespawnchunks. We call it The Render Distance. It's the extended version of the podcast, and you can get it by becoming a patron over there. It is the first episode of the month, so of course, we want to thank our patrons for their generous support throughout 2022 because it's also the last month of the year. It's not the last show of the year, but we are going to take a couple of breaks from recording over the holiday season because Christmas and New Year are usually big markers on the calendar for us, so we might end up pre-recording a couple of episodes for the main feed in a couple of weeks' time, just so that you folks have some stuff to listen to over the holiday season, but we don't have to sit in our offices recording it when we could be spending time with family. The next monthly Minecraft Hangout with our patrons is going to be taking place in January, because we usually do those at the end of the year, and obviously people are going to have other concerns. But once again, we want to thank our patrons for their support into 2023.
So what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
I have been cleaning up. I've been doing a lot of cleanup because, as I think I mentioned in the last episode, one of the sort of fallouts from the storyline that's going on in Empires with the hermits visiting and everything was that Cubfan got possessed by the Skulk, and so he ended up placing Skulk catalysts everywhere under people's bases, and there were a whole lot of them, like more than you'd imagine was reasonable, but it's Cub. He never does anything by halves. So I've been making that a good excuse to tie up another ongoing storyline where I'm bartering with each of the Empires for a trinket that's been left to them by Rendog as one of his first 13 items that he gathered on the server. And so once everybody notices all of the Skulk spreading around their bases, I turn up and say, hi, do you want me to clean that up for you? Because I've been kind of teaching myself a bit more about Lightmatica, and thanks to my stream chat, they've given me a really useful way of detecting where the Skulk catalysts are, using the Lightmatica schematic verifier. So I'm limiting my use of that to just Skulk catalysts, because obviously it could be exploitable to find all kinds of other rare resources that I'm not really interested in depriving myself of the gameplay of finding those. But the Skulk catalysts are just going to be spreading Skulk whenever mobs die on the surface, so I decided I would help people clean up in exchange for whatever, renamed wooden pickaxe and piece of cobblestone and stuff that Rendog has been giving them. So we're kind of tying things up as far as the Empire's Hermitcraft collab stuff goes. The Hermits are trying to make their way home in the storyline right now, so we're kind of playing that out and seeing where that goes. But overall, it's been kind of a week of housekeeping for me.
Are you excited to get back to a more linear, I guess, way of telling stories on Empires? I mean, as fun as it is, I imagine it's been very busy.
It has been very busy. I think the thing that's really fallen by the wayside is my ability to just get on and build, and it's not that anyone's necessarily interrupting me with that. It's that I always want to be online to participate in anything that happens to be happening at the time. Yeah. Or I worked on a larger farm project like the Wither Skeleton Farm, so I felt like if anybody wanted, beacons and wither fights and some of the more iconic stuff to happen in their episodes, then I could help provide stuff for that. But that's meant that I haven't spent a lot of time in my creative world where I've been trying to plan out some of the builds for the ancient capital and have more monumental stuff built there. So yeah, I feel like I'm looking forward to getting back to that, and the interactiveness and the chaos that's been unfolding at the time has been really fun. It's been fun just to have such an active feeling server after a few months where people would be, away for a couple of weeks or have other commitments, and it felt like we came into Empire Season 2 with a lot of enthusiasm but less time, as opposed to last time around where we felt like we were dedicating a lot of time to it without really knowing what we had on our hands, and then it kind of built from there. So yeah, I think while obviously it'll be great to hang out with the Hermits some more while we can, I think it'll be nice to get back into a routine where I can feel like I'm back in the base building groove.
It's funny how excursions like that are fun deviations, but then when you've got a big project on the go, even when I'm having like frustrating times with it, I still, if I'm in the middle of something, and this is, I know this is a personal, I'm not sure how to describe it. I would think of it as a fault of mine. If I'm doing something and I'm interrupted mid doing something, I feel very like I really want to get back to finishing what I was
Yeah.
doing. Once
Yeah.
I'm done what I'm doing, I will give whoever interrupted me 110% of my attention.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult for me to kind of like stand up in the middle of whatever I'm doing. Like I remember I used to experience this when I was production managing. I'd be writing an email or doing some sort of task, and someone would come to my office door and I would physically take off my glasses and turn my chair. Otherwise, I would catch myself like looking back at the computer while
Hmm.
they're still talking to me. And if I took my glasses off, I couldn't see what was going on anyway. So it was a lot easier to like stay focused on the person, but I could feel that pull back to the task. And I'm
Yeah.
like that in Minecraft. If you interrupt what I'm doing in Minecraft, even if what I was doing is fun, then I will want to get back to the other thing as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and we've also been monitoring a lot of the audience reaction to some of this, and a lot of people are very excited about the fact that these two worlds are colliding, and people get to have lots more fun interactions. But there is definitely a core of the Hermitcraft audience that just wants them to get back to doing Hermitcraft the way it normally is, and
Yeah.
so yeah, we've obviously planned out a lot of the broad strokes of this collaboration with those people in mind, and thinking people are only going to tolerate the shenanigans for so long before they want us to get back to like the big builds on Hermitcraft and the base building on Empires, and all of the stuff that we are typically known for. So yeah, we've been planning the whole collaboration with that in mind, and we wanted to keep it to something that feels like it's just going to be like one of those events people look back on and go, wow, that was a fun few weeks before things return to normal.
It's like when one of your favorite sitcoms recasts an actor or
Yeah,
recasts a
yeah,
character.
absolutely.
Like even if it's better, like you have to get used to it. Like there's a vibe change, as there would be, for the actors in the workplace. But I can see how it's like that. What's that game of yes and I always talk about, where you like you kind of have to take the ball and run with it, even
Hmm.
if it's not necessarily how you would have done it or what you would have thought would be the next thing to happen. You just kind of have to keep on rolling. And I would imagine that with the Empire's crew, this is what the second season of Empires. Plus, you all have known each other in different venues, over the years. Um, and then you've got the Hermitcraft folks that are all tight. I would imagine that even though you're all friendly, there would still be that like different way of working. Like
Yes.
Hermitcraft has got a different vibe than Empires. Both great, but like, do they work well together? Or if they do, how long can that be maintained before the natural groove of the two different servers kind of wants to go their own way again?
Yeah, and with Hermitcraft coming to Empires, we had a very specific objective in mind for them, was that they build their own empire, and that becomes the Hermit Empire on the server, and that was what Hermitopia eventually became. And a few people split off from that, either in the early stages or later when it seemed like the project was kind of coming to a close. They kind of went, well, where does this leave me? Like, what do I end up doing to start to generate more interaction, or to find other stuff to occupy myself and find other things that really fit their style? Because yeah, the roleplay stuff on Empires isn't going to be for everyone, and I feel like I was maybe a good conduit for that, because I'm not necessarily all about the roleplay either. I like doing little projects and stuff that don't have to fit any kind of story, but it's been fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes out of it in future. How about you? What's the vibe on the Citadel this week?
It's been really fun, and I will give a shout out again to Cosmic Dancer and their organization of an ABBA caving event on
Oh, fun.
Friday night. Yeah, which I won. Puffs out chest. And I went into it thinking like this is going to be fun. I had to work out a couple of technical things. Discovered the push to mute button on Discord is way more useful than the push to talk button.
Uh-huh, yeah.
So I sorted that out with some help from Alistair. But once we got everything rolling, Cosmic explained the rules. I had never played before, and we just went to a new area. I thought that they had chosen a random spot, but it actually was not too far from West Hill. It was actually a couple thousand blocks away. And all I did was, as soon as they said go, I just took off with my Elytra and started looking for a big cave. like a bit like anything. And I found a big dripstone cave, which saved me from digging. So I just started grabbing whatever I could see as I was going, and the mission was just to keep on going down and down and down. I don't know what's good for Abba caving. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we did it for an hour, which I think is the normal rule. We did a half an hour with a break, and then we did another half an hour. And everybody's friends on the server. It was all a friendly competition. But my final score was 965. And I had found 3 spawners because I found one in the dripstone cave, and then I found an intersected abandoned mine shaft, and I just stopped what I was doing and just kind of like ran really quickly through the mine shaft looking for as many spawners as I could find, and nice. I ended up grabbing 2 more, and so that helped a lot. But I was also down in deep slate level, and what seemed to be the big winners for me was grabbing redstone and copper from the deep slate ores, because those were worth like 5 points a piece or something like that. I did have a lot of copper. There was a lot of copper in the dripstone cave, and that was just regular copper, and that wasn't worth a lot, but I just had so much of it that I had like 3 stacks or something. So it was a lot of fun. I very quickly realized how dangerous Abba caving is in 119.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of dark areas, especially deeper down in those cheese caves or whatever.
Oh man, like they're just like, and huge. Like you get into a big dripstone cave, there's stuff dropping on you. Like just, I had like 3 creepers and 4 skeletons all coming at me at once. And it was just like, the solution was run away and then regroup and come back. And I did end up, I thought I was going to switch and have a chest plate. And for folks that don't know, I usually only wear iron armor just for the extra challenge. And I didn't bother to switch it over for this particular event. But I did keep my elytra just handy in my ender chest, because very often I'd have a water bucket with me, but in the essence of time, I was like, it's just going to take me too much time to get down there. Like I can see a safe place to land. I'm just going to glide down, put my elytra away as soon as I get there, and then move on. And I used it quite frequently just to kind of illustrate how big the cave was that I was in. And it was a lot of fun for 2 reasons. One, I mean, the caving and the conversation that we had and being able to chat with everybody on the server. It's the first time we've done any kind of competition that I've participated in anyway. Alistair has done some mini games and stuff in the past. But it was the combination of that, but then also just the exploration, like the brand new 119 generated terrain. Nothing has been touched, and you're just, it's kind of, the sky's the limit. And it was really fun to kind of see how far you could get. There was definitely some claustrophobic moments. Like I can't remember what they're called. They were like fissures or crevices, or like they gave them a technical term in the cave generation, but they was just big enough for me to fit through. And I just remember going through it and thinking, like, it didn't make me uncomfortable, but I just maybe thought into myself, in real life, this would be a nope. Like there'd be no way that I'd be pushing my 6'1" frame through this little hole in the wall. Not happening. And so that was interesting and led to some really cool finds like deep slate gold, deep slate diamond, because you end up going down so quickly, because you don't have to dig. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And we talked about doing more stuff like that. I'm even tossing around the idea, and I might pick your brain about this later, about setting up a temporary server where we would do like a modded Skyblock together.
Oh, cool.
So that it wouldn't be so grindy,
Yeah. Like I think Skyblock as an individual project can be a lot of fun, but if you get tired of doing farms constantly, then having a few other people to split the responsibilities with can be really fun. And it also gives you a reason to do it beyond just like a YouTube series or a stream series in our case, and having somebody to share that stuff with. So if you want to build something in a Skyblock world that's not just for technical purposes, then other people can be there to appreciate the fact that you've built a starter house despite not really needing it all that much. But yeah, I expect it was nice for you to get out there and do some 118 plus exploration, considering that since before 118 you've been working on West Hill, and that's not really merited a great deal of the caving and exploration that everyone's been doing since 118.
No, because West Hill is built on 116 land.
Yeah.
It was around the time that the Nether update came out. I have been working on it though, and I was able to put together the start of some builds in the northwest corner, basically the Riverside kind of area, adding like a couple things that might attach to the tower, adding a couple of homes and stuff. They were there in very, very loose kind of foundations over the last few months, but this is the first time I've gone in and tried to like figure out, okay, what's going on? Like, I like to go in and kind of plan the feel of something. And then once it starts to feel right, I'll go in and start laying out rough rooms. You know, is this going to work as a kitchen? Is this going to work, excuse me, as a main room? And I feel like I do that to make sure I don't have to like change the outside wall. Like before I start decorating something, I was like, oh, okay, if I really want this kitchen to have a fireplace, then I might have to move this wall by 2 blocks. And I don't want to do that after I've already decided and decorated the outside. So I went through and I was going through a bunch of different rooms, and I'm liking the feel of it. It's turning into quite a large build. I've added like an additional roof off to the back of it, plus a chimney. And there are 2 homes, and the fun part of this build, I think, and the focal point is the walled garden that is in between them. And I'm hoping to put in like a little pond and have some benches and flowers everywhere. And both homes will have their main rooms kind of facing the garden. So I have to make a lot of adjustments inside for things like big windows, which means that you can't put bookshelves up against the wall there and stuff like that. And so it's been challenging in that way. Also, I think I mentioned this last week where we've got so many builds all around. In some ways, it's great because it forces you to create a build of a certain shape and a certain size because you have no other place to go. But unfortunately, it means that there's blocks that you've used on 4 sides, and you're just like, well, I don't want to just copy what I've done before, and I don't want to make something that clashes. And when I'm walking down the road, I don't want this house to be too brown or too gray because then it's going to blend into the thing next to it. So
Sure.
I'm trying to find the right block combination. And I really wanted to do a gradient in the roof. And this is the point of frustration for me. I've got some things that are working, but I haven't decided which I want to actually use. There's a screenshot in our live chat that shows the Rubik's Cube roof
Hmm.
right now. And I'm just running through a bunch of different ideas as to what might be the best course of action. And I really wanted to try to use bees' nests. And I didn't have very many. I went looking for some. And then I ended up bringing 1 or 2 back. And then someone suggested that I start growing trees next to flowers, which I completely forgot that you could do. And the percentage is so low that I just got frustrated. I ended up with a couple of stacks of oak, which I needed anyway, so I did it for about 10 minutes on stream, but I only got one bee's nest out of like 10 minutes of chopping down trees. So it wasn't the best experience. Now, the funny part was, and this led to some interesting just stream shenanigans, was that one of the beehives that I stole from the woods, it wasn't too far away, and the bee followed me. It took an hour, but eventually I heard the little pop and I was like, what the? And sure enough, one of the bees that I stole their home had followed me all the way back to Weston and was now like pollinating a nearby flower and then going back up into the roof and going into the hive or
Yeah.
into the nest. So I had to grab him with a lead and take him into the basement of the keep where I had like beehives set up to move the bees to, so they would stay there with flowers, and then I could, get my own honey at some point. But I found that the bees nests were harder to work with than I thought. I kind of thought for whatever reason that they were yellow on the bottom and more beige on top, but it's the reverse.
Yeah.
So you kind like they work really well if you put them next to oak, but then like what yellow block do you want to put next to them? And so that became challenging. And so I haven't yet figured out what I want to do. There's only, I want to say 6 blocks, maybe 7 in the roof vertically. So to try to find a gradient that I can work with and trying to find a roof material that is not something that I've already used in like too much of. My fallback plan is to make a oak roof with some decorative geometry to it. And I know I can do it and I know it'll look okay. But right now I'm still kind of like stubbornly trying to figure out what can I get going with some sort of gradient. So if you have any pointers on it, I'm not sure if you've done a gradient on a roof before, but if you have any tips, I'm open to them because as much fun as it was this weekend to have that like free, like I'm not really refining anything. I'm just kind of throwing ideas at this house and seeing what sticks. You don't feel very accomplished by the end of it because you haven't really finished anything. But I'm really looking forward. I can feel that the build will look good. It's just that I'm at that frustrating point where I haven't made any decisions yet.
Yeah. I've done roof gradients before, but I don't recall any that are quite like this, so it's tricky. But like as usual, I point people to Gemini Tay just as a great example of a builder who uses gradients wonderfully in basically everything she does. But yeah, I do like the using natural bee nests as part of that, and you've got some jungle wood in one of these screenshots in part of the roof that I'm thinking that looks like it blends into the bottom of the bee nest better even than oak does at times, so that could almost be part of it. But then yeah, it's how you get away from the yellow part, unless the yellow part is the very top line of the roof and that's really meant to look like the sun is shining on it, at which point you've got to try and emulate that with some of the other materials as well to really sell it. So that's quite a difficult one, but worth experimenting with, and it's just fun to get yourself out of the usual corner of this is just going to be one of roof type B that you've done elsewhere. Like you can fall back into old habits and that kind of thing, or you can try and branch out and see what you like or don't like about techniques like this. I think the main thing that I would normally stick to is that if you're including a variety of materials in there, then trying to make sure that they all have the same flow of texture. So with bee nests and with planks, they've all got lines across the middle in roughly the same places. Same with stuff like composters and whatnot. And you've obviously got hay bales in here as well. And while the grain of the hay as it's been bundled is horizontal the way you've placed it, the bands that are wrapping around it are vertical, and I find that throws stuff off a little bit, and it becomes more obvious that there are different types of blocks there. The other thing to remember about gradients is that they're almost always better when viewed at a distance, so you'll find that you like them less when you're taking up-close screenshots of them, because what they're really meant to do is provide that natural sort of blend of color that when you see it from a distance looks a lot more linear than when you're looking at it up close and you're seeing the geometry of the roof and you're seeing individual blocks that way. And it can be difficult to shake your mind out of that mindset when you've been building for a while and you've been building all of this stuff up close. So I really think stepping back and taking a look at it is a better metric by which to decide, do I like the look of this roof once the gradient's in there?
Yeah, I definitely need to find a vantage point that's far enough away. I have a far enough away point in the other direction. The gable, I can get quite far away and see it, but the roof, the side of it, the shingled side, I have to be a little bit farther away, I think, before I can make that arrangement. I think too, something that just dawned on me is that I've been kind of stuck on a single gradient from the very peak of the roof all the way down to the bottom, whereas I could do a simple gradient of maybe 2 or 3 blocks and just repeat it. Because something you said about having the bees' nests be like the top of the roof, I could have that at every high point. Like there's the top, there's about a third of the way down, and then there's like another ridge at the bottom. And the whole roof could be a lot more yellow, which was what I wanted to try and accomplish anyway.
Yeah.
So that could be good. I just don't really feel like getting that many bees' nests. I'm not sure how many that would be, but we're looking at probably at least a half a stack, and that's going to take an eon.
Yeah.
So there is that. But thanks. Like I definitely, I'm still in the early stages of it. And I can definitely tell from other gradients that I've tried that one of the problems I have in Westhill is the scale that I'm working at.
Yeah.
And in order to do it successfully, I might have to pick and choose my battles. Like maybe if I change the keep, I do have plans to increase the roof size on the keep. And if I do it there, I will probably have more like 12 blocks to work with. And that might be a little bit more realistic in terms of being able to, one, have the number of blocks needed, but also from a distance would look really cool compared to just like something that's half the size. This is like, what, 6 or 9 blocks? So, but we'll see. Thanks, man. Yeah, like it's definitely a learning process. And these are the last 2 new builds in the town. Like after this, I'm going to be refining stuff and doing textures and having like little small builds added to it. But these are the last few buildings that are actually, there's no more room within the walls. We're at capacity.
Nice. So yeah, I can see you wanting to get those done before 1.20 arrives and you get the yellow wood option of bamboo planks. Yeah. That's maybe something better saved for a future build instead of, leaving this roof undone until then.
Speaking of the future, let's grab some news. Minecraft Java Edition 1.19.3, pre-release 3, came out November 29th. In the bug fixes for pre-release 3, a shulker box still plays shulker closes sounds even if destroyed or replaced, and in certain circumstances, chests, trapped chests, and barrels do not open after respawning. Dying whilst the shulker box GUI will spam the shulker closes sound effect, and villagers and piglins no longer seek out items, and the note_block_sound data is lost when breaking a player head. These and many other bugs can be found in the list of changes in pre-release 3 for 1.19.3. We've also had release candidates, release candidate 1 and 2 for 1.19.3. The second was posted just during our pre-show, so we had to make a couple of adjustments here on the fly. Smooth lighting in candidate 1 has a minimum and maximum level. They were not changing. That's been fixed. And pick block doesn't work on the Ender Dragon. And you're like, wait, what? The Ender Dragon? It's like, yes, when you pick block an Ender Dragon, you want the player to get the egg for the dragon if you're in, say, like a creative situation. So that has been fixed. In release candidate 2, with this release candidate, we, that's Mojang, are reverting a behavior change for translation strings due to a prevalent but unsupported use case. Expect this behavior to be changed in the future to provide a supported alternative. Also, slots like %s in translations no longer ignore missing elements in width and cannot join LAN world while offline. These bugs in release candidate 2 have been fixed.
I believe we're looking at tomorrow for a full release, correct? So
correct.
1.19.3, whatever that means, should be coming out tomorrow. In the meantime, Bedrock Edition update 1.19.50 is now available. Spectator Mode has finally made its way into a full release of Minecraft Bedrock Edition. Previously behind the experimental toggle, this is now accessible in regular gameplay. When cheats are enabled, players can go in and out of Spectator Mode using the usual personal game mode options in world settings or the command /game mode spectator. The article that we have linked in our show notes continues to explain the features of Spectator Mode, but we're skipping over most of that since we're familiar with it from Java Edition. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is definitely worth a read. Also, new touch controls are now enabled in touch devices by default. Players can choose between a joystick and tap to interact, a joystick and aim crosshair, or a D-pad and tap to interact, as 3 different control schemes. The 7 new default skins are now available from the dressing room on Bedrock Edition. They've also updated the model and texture of the Vex with this release. The Vex also retains a slightly larger hitbox, as it does on Java, to make it easier to fight. A variety of other parity changes and bug fixes that we've covered in Bedrock Edition betas in previous editions of this show are now implemented as of this update. So once again, tune into the changelog if you want to see those. And the experimental toggle now focuses on features for the next major update, including things like bamboo wood, chiseled bookshelves, etc., that previously were just covered in betas.
I mean, admittedly, I'm not a Bedrock player. I've messed around a little bit on the Xbox just to kind of have that controller experience and be able to talk about the contrast of that with playing Java with a mouse on the PC. But I always want to applaud the work that goes into the parity changes, because it feels like every time they are updating Bedrock and we share that news on the show, that there's a long list of like parity changes that bring the 2 versions closer together. Everything's more consistent. Obviously, a spectator mode is huge.
Yeah, and I think spectator mode might even be a big milestone on the roadmap to implementing hardcore mode. I do wonder if that's their end game, because a lot of players have been very interested in hardcore mode on Java Edition in recent years, and I expect a lot of the player base is wondering why that's not available on Bedrock, and so I wonder if spectator mode being implemented is one of the things along the way to getting hardcore mode implemented on Bedrock, or if there is still any kind of other roadblock there from a development standpoint. It's been my speculation for a while that they didn't implement hardcore mode because it meant deleting your world, and I got the sense that console manufacturers and maybe even like the Apple file system weren't too keen on stuff like that just being deleted because of gameplay going wrong. And so I do wonder if there is potentially still something there that's preventing them from implementing hardcore mode. There's also the occasional issues with unfortunate deaths due to bugs on Bedrock Edition more frequently than there are on Java, so I'm wondering if maybe they're trying to iron out a few of those along the way. One other thing I will say about Spectator Mode is that Prowl8413, friend of the show, he was on a previous episode talking about parity between Bedrock and Java, highlighted his concerns on Twitter this week about the future of Minecraft RTX on Bedrock Edition, and retweeted one of the folks who's been working on RTX resource packs and PBR resource packs for RTX. Unfortunately, there are rendering issues with RTX when using Spectator Mode. As you clip through the scenery, you can see the inside faces of blocks, which means you can't see through walls into caves and other enclosed environments. You see the wall of the cave that you would emerge out of if you flew through it. So a lot of it becomes more opaque than it should be using standard Spectator Mode. And I think a lot of the people who have been working with Minecraft RTX for a while now are kind of left wondering whether it's going to see continued development or not, or if it's just going to be like a fun tool in people's toolkit but isn't really adapting to a more modern approach to Minecraft Bedrock Edition.
I can see how the flashing, like the screen flashing that would happen of not being able to see through walls when you're traveling around in spectator mode would be really hard to deal with. Like if you have any kind of visual issues, like I would probably get a headache. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like if you spend a lot of time, like if you're developing a map, or like you're maybe you're judging an ABBA caving run and you've got to fly around and look at everybody, like whatever it is that you're doing, like that would be really, really tedious and hard on the eyes, hard to deal with. Hopefully they'll fix that. It's funny when you brought up the RTX thing, because I was hoping for more for Windows 10 and Minecraft RTX, because when I first saw it, I thought, okay, wow, now this is something that I could really get on board with. It felt really creative. I was frustrated that I didn't have the capability to run it on my computer, because one, I needed an RTX card, but two, I don't even know if I had an RTX card, I don't think my system could handle it. My system can't handle shaders right now. Especially if I'm streaming. So like that to me was like a far off thing. But as much kind of cool factor and as much press as it got within the Minecraft community early on, I really haven't heard boo about it in quite a long time. And it starts to remind me of like the sizzle reel that you might see at like a super cool shader pack, or some other thing in Minecraft. But it's like, well, that's cool and all, but if it doesn't have any real gameplay applications, like if I can't play the game, or if it doesn't, like it might make Minecraft look cool, but once you start building with it, if things start to look really strange, like I start to think about those shader packs that look really great in terms of like the landscape of the mountains and the trees and the grass, they all look fantastic. But when you start to build square buildings out of everything, it starts to fall apart, like things that are too high res or whatever. And so they just end up being like well, this is cool looking, but it's not all that practical. And I'm wondering if Minecraft RTX has fallen into that kind of like, it was a cool thing, it was a cool exercise of technology. Minecraft was a cool way to showcase that technology, but ultimately, it just doesn't seem to have caught on. And something that I was wishing would happen, and we were just talking about this on the Citadel Cafe a few weeks ago, myself and Alistair. He was talking about OnLive, which was an old, now defunct remote service where you would, a very robust system would play the game and you would just use the internet and you would play remotely. And I've got access to xCloud via Xbox Game Pass. And only if it's a casual game does it feel seamless. If it's anything that has any kind of graphics, you notice immediately. Now, to be fair, my Xbox is currently on Wi-Fi. It's not plugged in, but I still have 100 megabits symmetrical. I shouldn't have an issue. If the game is working and xCloud is working the way that it should. I was really hoping, and I'm sure that RTX is just far too high, far too intense, I guess, for this kind of thing. But I was hoping to get access to RTX on my PC, because I have Windows 10 Bedrock, or Windows 10 Edition rather, and my PC is obviously hardwired. And it's a beefy enough PC to stream and do all the things that I want to do with it, but it's not quite there for RTX. And I thought that if RTX ever made it to xCloud, I was like, that is going to be my ticket to give it a go, because then I won't have to invest $1,000 into an RTX card just to try Minecraft RTX. And it hasn't caught on to the point where I could even justify buying the hardware. So my next step would be, remote.
Yeah. I think it's difficult with the RTX thing in particular, because while I expect Mojang has a lot of people in their employ who can work on stuff like this, RTX seemed to be a very close collaboration between them and NVIDIA, because it's proprietary NVIDIA graphics card technology that makes a lot of this stuff possible and more seamless. So I think part of the issue there is that it's an ongoing, evolving product, Minecraft is, whereas if you're just developing RTX capabilities for a game like Cyberpunk 2077 or Call of Duty, you end up with a finite product that once you've implemented RTX, you don't have to keep up with what it's doing in future, unless, say, there's like DLC or something like that. But with Minecraft being a constantly evolving thing, you have to develop a continuous relationship with the people who are helping you implement it in the game if you're getting help to do it. And I assume that whatever relationship is there was really there for a fixed time for them to develop Minecraft RTX for the current version of Minecraft at the time, and then not necessarily continue that in perpetuity. So either the project gets handed over to somebody else, or it falls by the wayside and ends up not really continuing as Minecraft's development does, which is a real shame. And I don't want to do too much speculation here about that, because I don't know what's going on with it behind the scenes, but that would be my assumption, is that NVIDIA helped them implement it for Minecraft at the time, and it still exists as part of their rendering engine, but it's not really something they can continue to develop on their own as new features as big as Spectator Mode get added into Bedrock Edition Minecraft.
Yeah, to me, it felt like it was a great partnership with NVIDIA to pair with the most popular video game on the planet to showcase RTX.
Yeah.
As opposed to Minecraft is going to have RTX from now on. You know what I mean? Like there was a distinct difference for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk 119.3 very briefly before we move on to the emails. Are you planning on updating the Citadel to 119.3?
Yeah, and I'm hoping to do it soon, because we actually skipped 119.2. We're still running point one, just out of time constraints, and I think 2 came out just like I was getting ready to update 1, and then 2 came out. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to wait and see. And then with Minecraft Live and the announcement of the minor updates, and just not having the time to go through and update a bunch of mods and things like that, I decided, like, okay, well, now that we have a release date for 119.3, I checked with my server mates and said, look, it's a lot of work to update. Are we cool with just waiting a couple of weeks? And then once 19.3 is out and the mods that we're using are up to date, we will switch and move over. Because there's always a pain period. Like, there's always a period, even when the mods are updated and when Minecraft is updated, there still seems to be a point where my machine doesn't quite run the way that it's supposed to, or the server isn't running quite the way that it's supposed to. So it's difficult in that way. I also have to wait for my hosting provider to allow me to update, because it's not always day one.
Yeah.
So now with the release candidates and the pre-releases and all the data that we've been getting over the last few weeks, and the fact that all of the mods that we use on the Citadel are Fabric, usually those update quite quickly. I've seen a number of versions of the different Fabric mods coming through, but they're all 19.2 versions right now. I haven't looked into the 19.3, but usually it's only a couple of days. And I don't usually have the time, like day of, to update stuff. And usually, again, because this is my job a lot of the time, I don't want to update day one, because if anything goes wrong, then that can screw up a stream. It can be very frustrating. So I'll probably wait about a week. So it'll come out tomorrow. I'll probably stream this weekend on 19.2. I might have some free time over the holidays to do the update and let the dust settle before we get into the new year. So I do hope to be on 19.3 before the new year. And I'm also struggling to refresh my memory as to what that actually means. I know there's a lot of bug fixes and stuff, but I'll have to just go back to the original snapshot posts and read through the posts. If only there was a podcast that I could go and listen to and get the rundown of what changes are happening in 119.3. I might recognize a couple of voices, but yeah, that's the plan, is we are going to update. It's just a matter of what mods and when.
If you don't have time to listen back through our old episodes of the podcast or comb the change logs, I will recommend the Minecraft Wiki. They do a fantastic job of collating what features actually apply to which update, and their article about 1.19.3 has listed them, and they usually do this for every major and most minor updates and the snapshots, so there's plenty of information there. And it is a lot of under the hood stuff. It's a lot of new command formats, the new game rules about whether blocks drop things after they've been exploded by various sources, that kind of thing, and snow accumulation height and things like that are being implemented as minor changes in 19.3. So I expect we'll see a few people updating to that, but it's not necessarily a priority. It's certainly not for Empires, because we've had a custom mod coded for us in 1.19 from the beginning, and I think updating that to some of the minor releases, if we're not using the features from the minor releases, is sort of superfluous to our requirements. I think the only thing I would want from the last few releases really would be the opportunity to duplicate allays, and even then, people aren't champing at the bit to use them. It would just be convenient on the off chance that people wanted them. So yeah, aside from that, I don't think I'm going to really interact with it until I go back into survival guide stuff in the new year. And even then, a lot of the changes don't really affect survival gameplay so much as creative and map making stuff. So we'll see what features make themselves known. For now, let's move on to chunk mail. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. This email comes in from By the Horns, who is a landscape artist member of our Discord, and the subject is profession sounds. Hey Joel and Pix, your discussion on adding sound to your Minecraft world and the upcoming mobhead and noteblock interactions got me thinking about the custom village in my world, which feels a bit lifeless, and how I could go about adding sounds to it. A couple of ideas were hits, like adding lava in the floor, and water columns in the walls of my witch's alchemist shop to make the bubbling sounds you'd associate with cauldrons, or adding a conveyor on a clock that drops an anvil every so often in my blacksmith's shop to make it sound like hammering is being done, or maybe an apprentice knocking over a weapon rack. I quickly realised, though, that there are a lot of profession-based sounds that I couldn't replicate unless it was villagers working at workstations, and even then it was limited, although for the butcher it's probably for the best. That's when it hit me. What if villager workstations got the same upcoming functionality that mob heads are getting, like multiple sounds when using a stonecutter or an anvil? They'd probably need to add some new sounds for things like the blast furnace, smoker, and fletching table. I think it could really add a ton of atmosphere. I was hoping to hear your thoughts about the idea and maybe other blocks you think could get similar treatment. By the Horns died while doing Foley work, but then again, you might just be hearing things.
That's a clever outro. I like that. I like the idea of putting a profession block on top of a note block to play a profession noise. You could hide the note block, power it with a redstone clock based on your needs, and potentially have some really cool stuff happening. I was just saying the other day that I wish there was a way I could permanently light a furnace to be burning, making the crackling noise. It glows a little bit when it's smelting something. So I could use that as a way to decorate my town. So not every fireplace in my town has a crackling campfire in it. Usually I'll mix it up and have like a wood stove, or in smaller places it's kind of nice to have a furnace with a pipe coming out the top of it, like a cobblestone wall, and it looks like, you know, someone would have a small wood burning stove, but it's always unlit. It feels very cold and lifeless, and the ability to somehow have a furnace burning but not smelting anything, so you're not getting infinite fuel, like you're not able to smelt anything in it, but just being able to turn it on in a way would be very, very cool. Halfway there would be hiding a campfire somewhere and hearing the crackle, but that's not always what you want to do. And I can see this being really useful for things like the anvil sounds, the stonecutter sounds. I like the stonecutter sounds quite a lot, and I feel like you could have. I don't think we have. Does the crafting bench make any like sawing noises, or am I making that up in my head?
I don't think it does. I think historically it hasn't. No, I think because we craft so many things, I think it might get a little old after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, like things like the smithing table and whatnot, I think they've got a lot of really good sounds to them. So yeah, like I wouldn't mind this as functionality. I think we're at the point now where we're into feature creep, in a sense. Like we're at the point now where we've seen them do something new and interesting with note blocks, and we just want control over every sound effect in the game at this point. Like, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good for players to want to make their areas feel a little bit more alive without having to worry about villagers being absolutely everywhere and so forth. So I think that makes a good deal of sense. And there are a few neat ways you can incorporate sounds without having to worry as much about triggering sound effects and stuff. The bubbling columns in the walls is a really cool idea. I had a friend back in the day who, I don't know if he plays Minecraft too much anymore, but he was a prodigy at some of this stuff, and he ended up putting guardians in his attic at one point, so it sounded like a haunted house because of the moaning sounds that they make when they're in water and not like flapping around. And I thought that was a really interesting touch, even if you did occasionally see the tail coming up through the roof. But I think it was such a neat idea to incorporate more ambient sound into that stuff. I'm not sure if the note block is the right way to do that, but your only alternative then is to leap into a creative mode kind of capacity and have sound effects triggered by command blocks every so often, which is something you can do if you really want to create that kind of environment and that atmosphere, but it's probably not something people are at all considering doing in worlds that they normally play in survival.
It could be something as simple as redstone powering a profession block.
I mean, it could be. Yeah, that's not too bad of a suggestion. I don't know how many people would use, like, I mean, maybe composters end up getting used a fair bit in redstone contraptions, but most often it's because of the interaction with hoppers that, their capacity ends up getting used anyway. So if you power something with a composter, it's going to make the same noises as if you're, actually using it, and that's probably happening somewhere in your system if you need a composter there anyway. There's some interesting stuff there. I don't mind that as an idea.
I actually used the water trick. It was something I did by accident, but I've used it a couple times, and we'll plan on doing it specifically throughout West Hill. And that's along the river, which is still, because that's how Minecraft water works. If you hide running water somewhere nearby, when you go down to a dock, you can hear the water running.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just enough to trick your brain into thinking that there's some water happening. And I've thought often about trying to hide like a bubble column somewhere too. I've done it on purpose where I've seen the soul sand and created like bubbles at the base of a small waterfall. By the way, don't do it at a koi pond; you'll kill all your fish.
Yeah.
But it does, it like even the combination of the visual with the running water, like it really does a lot for the very still water in Minecraft. So there are definitely some cool tricks there. The lava thing would be a good idea for the bubbling effect too. I'm trying to think, like, it's too bad that I know that a lot of the cool noises in the Nether are linked to the biomes and not necessarily to the material, because you wouldn't want to go and build with basalt in the overworld and have your house like crackling all the time.
Yeah.
But it's too bad that there aren't a few more things that you could do like that would have like similar sound effects. And the funny thing that happened to me there on stream this weekend with the bee popping in and out of the bee's nest, that is such a distinct noise. And it's not, I don't know if you could use it for anything else, but it would be very silly. And it would be kind of, I almost want to hide a bee situation somewhere on the server under someone's build so they can kind of have that pop happen every once in a while.
Yeah.
It's not a threatening thing. It's like a very friendly, like, that was a peculiar sound. Where the heck did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be used for fun. Like, you could even have it at like maybe a carnival with like whack-a-mole. There's a bunch of different implementations, but yeah, it would be fun to have more control over that stuff, I think.
I think that was something Etho did on a previous season of Hermitcraft. He just hid bees under everybody's floors. Anybody who like signed up to a service that was like pest control, and what it turned out to be was like, I'm controlling the pests to be underneath your floor or something like that.
Right. Clever. Our next email comes from Rosie, or Snow Rose 77, a landscape artist member of our community, changing block appearances. Hello, Jonny and Joel. Big fan and patron. In the last episode, you talked about making the soundscape of a base, and I loved it. Joel mentioned liking the twinkling sound of amethyst, but not always wanting the purple color or having to use carpet. I remembered that green amethyst is a thing in real life. It can be made by heating or irradiating regular purple amethyst. This got me thinking, inventory space aside, what if we could have more blocks by changing the ones we already have? Irradiation may be tricky in Minecraft, but what about the array of furnaces that we have? Amethyst can be put in a blast furnace. It could be made into green amethyst. Wood logs or planks in a smoker could be charred wood. Imagine most of the wood types will give you the same output. Same with chests. What other blocks do you think would be changed or remade? What crafting or furnace stations could be used? Rosie died trying to irradiate amethyst.
Oh, yeah, got to be careful with that. I'm going to skip over what my immediate thought would be because it's the boring option of like, well, we can just retexture amethyst at this point. Like, we can just
Yeah.
implement a resource pack that makes amethyst look like whatever you want it to, and that way you don't have to worry about the amethyst. It would make geodes look incredibly weird if you turned up to a geode and inside it just looked like wood planks or whatever you wanted to disguise the amethyst as. And of course, on servers, you've got to rely on everybody having the same resource packs. So it's not the ideal solution, but I do like the idea of there being science and kind of learning about a chemical reaction of sorts to make green amethyst by putting it in a furnace. That's an interesting thing. And I suppose there are a few blocks already that set a precedent for that, like terracotta and glazed terracotta. It's not adding any functionality to the block, really, except maybe it can't be pulled by slime blocks or something, but there's not a huge amount there that's changing other than the aesthetics.
I like the idea of using in-game mechanics to get more block textures too. There's still work that needs to be done by the player in finding, sourcing, and farming the material, and of course fueling the furnace if that's the mode that we're talking about. I think because Rosie mentioned like heat and irradiation in her email, that I just start thinking about furnaces and what else you could like use heat to make that change. And to me, that would also eliminate the need for Mojang to like figure out how to generate this new block in the world. Like you think about amethyst and calcite and geodes and is it smooth basalt that's outside of them? I think it's smooth basalt that's on the outside of
Yeah,
geodes.
yeah, it's the one that you smelt to get it. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the thing that, like all that had to be considered into, distribution. And if you're dealing with any kind of new ores, then that would have to be considered. And I feel like just making the player, turn it into something else to get the new block is a still something that requires gameplay, but it does not require quite as much integration into the natural world, I guess, because it's a player made thing. It's kind of like concrete, right? Like, I mean, concrete, you need sand and gravel and dye, but then you get concrete powder and solid concrete, but neither of those are found anywhere in the world. Like, they're completely made by the player.
Yeah.
For me, because of the whole smelting thing stuck in my brain, I thought it would be cool to double fire iron to get a cast iron texture. So similar to an anvil or a cauldron, if you wanted to have your iron bars, you could still have the shiny iron bars, but if you fired them again, you would get the darker iron bars, or vice versa, depending on which would make more sense. Maybe the change would be your natural iron bars are the wrought iron, and if you wanted the shiny ones, then you'd have to smelt them again to get them. I'd be okay with that because after a certain point, now that we've got bamboo in the game, like it's a pretty easy way to get some infinite fuel for your furnaces, and it's not like it would be difficult, but it would also be fun to set up an infinite fuel system and then be able to turn all your iron blocks or iron made things into the kind of stuff that you want. Maybe people want to go the other way with lanterns. Maybe they want shiny lanterns instead of the more bluey gray lanterns that we have now. And so that could be a fun way to kind of just change the color of something or the texture of something in a furnace. And the other thing that I was thinking about was we've got things like smooth basalt, although it's crafted differently. But then we've got deep slate. But what if you could take deep slate and smelt it, and it would then smooth it out and give you a lighter gray to bridge between deep slate and natural stone? And I don't think we need another gray block in the game, because of the comment about inventory, but I feel like there could be some interesting changes in texture because there are some blocks I find that they're the right color, but the texture is too noisy and I don't want to use them. They don't fit the specific use case. Or I find not the specific, I find over and over again they don't fit my use case. And I thought, man, if I could just make this texture not so noisy, not so aggressive, then it would really, really work in this situation. And I find I often think that. So having the established mechanic of putting something in a furnace to then smooth it out, like stone becoming smooth stone, I think that's an interesting idea. And I'm trying to think about like other blocks that we could smooth out. Calcite is a cool looking block, but some people might want it to be whiter and smoother, and smoothing that out in a furnace could be kind of cool. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what if you fired coral blocks in the furnace to keep them from losing their color if they're not adjacent to water in the world?
Yeah, like there's definitely some merit to that. Like I've been using a bit of coral recently for some behind the scenes stuff and thinking it's really hard to work with in other ways. And I think that's obviously part of the point, mechanically speaking.
Yes.
The whole
Yeah.
idea is that you have to keep it adjacent to water to keep it alive. But even then, it seems like that's mechanically speaking putting players in a situation where they find it too difficult to work with, too much of a challenge, and they don't want to deal with it.
I mean, mechanically speaking, it might be more consistent to wax coral to keep its color, inconsistent with like the copper blocks and how we deal with that. It's
Yeah.
funny that we didn't come up with coral when someone was talking about waxing and that mechanic a few episodes ago in an email, that we didn't put coral forth as something that we'd like to keep from changing. Because I think one of the things with coral is that it changes so fast that people just, they either use it gray or they don't use it at all, because there's no in between. Like it has that difficulty level as well. I mean, some of it's been opened up since we've been able to waterlog blocks. That helps with the coral, but not as much as I think people would like.
Yeah. And as far as other examples for this email, this is the kind of thing that when I get put on the spot about it, I can't think of anything, but all of these come up as like,
Yeah.
occasional ideas that something will jog my memory and I'll go, wait a second, what if? So apologies if I'm not contributing to this too much right now, but I do love the charred wood idea. I think that's a really neat one for
Yeah.
stuff like wasteland builds and like when areas are meant to look kind of burnt out and you don't have anything that looks convincing enough like a wood plank or you have to kind of work with other stuff. You put like magma blocks in as though there are cinders that are still smoldering, and you can do some stuff like that. But I do love the idea of having like a charred black wood, like a tree that's been struck by lightning or something like that. I think that'd be a really fun addition. And if you want to just make that a charcoal block so that it's also a fuel, but you can just have like a charred looking log, I wouldn't mind that at all.
Yeah, I mean, you look at any kind of used campfire in real life, and the charcoal is a light gray. It's not black,
Yeah.
And I think that having that extra kind of texture would be great. I like the idea of like having that old barn wood look. I'm not sure if you have that around the area, where you are, but around here, a lot of the barns out in the farmlands will end up being bleached by the sun and then be gray and weathered. And sometimes even in modern architecture, people will like bring found wood in and create like unique structures and stuff with it. And that could be very fun in both kind of like, any kind of medieval or futuristic, or modern times build in Minecraft.
Sure, yeah. Lots to think about. And if nothing else, maybe a texture pack every so often. Maybe we can allow ourselves that. In the meantime, though, I want to talk about, for our main discussion this week, what makes a Minecraft world feel like home. And I've been thinking about this for a few different reasons. We're kind of approaching the end of the year, which is, I think, a good time for reflection and sentimentality. And I've frequently seen lately Minecraft subreddit posts on r/Minecraft where people have lost their worlds, whether it's to data corruption or, a death in hardcore mode or something like that. And they've been sharing like memorial screenshots of a world, being like, this is the last photo I took of my world before I had to move on. Looping back to our conversation about whether hardcore mode is on its way for Bedrock Edition, that could mean a fresh wave of hardcore players getting attached to worlds and then losing them. But also, from my own perspective, I've been focused on themes of preserving a world and averting threats to it recently throughout Season 2 of Empire's SMP. So I wanted to talk a little about how we tend to form closer sentimental attachments to Minecraft worlds, which, from the outside seem like a very disposable thing. You can create them, you can recreate the exact same landscape with the same seed, but once we've started getting attached to them, we consider them vital, we consider them worth defending, and we mourn them when they are lost. And I sort of thought we should have a discussion about why Minecraft worlds end up meaning so much to us over time.
Before we get into the meat of it, one thing I am curious about with the changes to Bedrock, if that ends up going towards the idea of having hardcore in Bedrock, I wonder if we saw the demographic in terms of ages of Bedrock players versus, say, Java players. And I'm wondering what, like, that permadeath, having to delete your world when you die in hardcore mode, how that's going to affect the player base if the demographic that plays Bedrock is younger, as I'm assuming that it is that plays Java. Because I'm just curious how younger players will handle that.
Yeah.
It's one thing, and then it's kind of, I can see the edge of your seat entertainment when you're watching an adult on YouTube that's playing a hardcore world, and they're worried about dying and losing access to the world. But it's a different thing when, and I'm not a parent, so don't quote me on this, but I imagine it's a very different thing when your 6-year-old is playing a hardcore world and dies and has to say goodbye to it. That's a different conversation. And I'm curious as to how that will be received,
Yeah, see, that's why Spectator Mode is such a valuable piece of the puzzle, because the implementation of Spectator Mode meant that when you died, you could spectate that world. And on Bedrock Edition, there's a very easy toggle for enabling cheats and putting yourself back in survival mode using the player mode menu. And the incentive not to do that is that you lose the ability to gather achievements from that world. Which to long-term console players who've already gathered the achievements in other worlds, it doesn't matter as much, but it makes more sense than it does on Java Edition, because you're still removing part of the experience because you can no longer gather achievements. You're just, allowing yourself to continue in that world after a death. Whereas on Java, there are various things that lock you from using cheats, and the thing you can do is enable your world to LAN and enable cheats that way, and then put yourself back in survival if you care that much, or edit the NBT data of your world if you care that much. So I think there is still a way out for those players. Like, there's still a way that either they or their parents, if a kid is going to be too upset about it, can still resolve that, as long as they're okay with enabling cheats for that world, I guess. So there's still consequences, but perhaps the consequences are more limited when Spectator Mode is available to them. But I think even then, the thing that gets everybody attached to Minecraft initially, I think, is that it's a simulation of real life, but is still removed from it enough that it makes it interesting. Like, Minecraft is a survival game, but survival is a very simple concept in Minecraft. You kill anything that tries to kill you, and you make sure you eat regularly, which, in a sense, makes it a good escape from the complexities of day-to-day life. But we still find ourselves simulating real life within that. When we build houses, like when you've been building the houses in West Hill on the Citadel, you've been thinking about the lives of people who inhabit those houses. You build a place that's got a bedroom and a kitchen, and you create a home from scratch, and you start to feel a sense of ownership and a sense of story. And if like there's a Minecraft equivalent of like home is where the heart is, it's home is where you respawn, right?
Right.
So I think there's a certain amount of real life simulation and a certain amount of projection that comes into play there, where you're inhabiting your Minecraft world in a sense that's more than just playing a video game. I wonder if the sense that the lack of a hand-holding progression through the game and a finite end to a Minecraft world is also part of what comes into play here, is the fact that nobody's going to tell you when the experience is done, and that feels a lot like real life in a sense, is that you don't have a set of objectives and then credits roll. It's like you've constantly got to be thinking about what to do next. And so part of the sandbox survival game formula that's been perfected, I think, by games like Minecraft is that you have infinite amounts of stuff that you can do, and you just have to have the imagination and the time to do it all.
Yeah, I think that what struck me about Minecraft and why I got attached to the world and how I could see other players getting attached to the world was not so much the survival simulation part of it, it was the control. And granted, like, zombies and creepers and things are not within your control, and we all would like to control villagers, but it's a pain in the butt.
Of course.
For me, it was like, I can totally understand how kids, especially in a world where you have to go to school, you have to go to bed on time, you have to eat what's on your plate, like all these things that you're told what to do for the first chunk of your life. And in Minecraft, it's like, if you don't like that block there, move it. And you can, and it's just a matter of how much time you want to spend moving things around. And then adults, like maybe your neighbor's house is an ugly color. Maybe they have a loud dog. Maybe they never mow their lawn. But in your neighborhood in Minecraft, everything is exactly how you want it.
Yeah.
And I think that level of control is really interesting to me. And one of the reasons why I think not only I got attached to Minecraft, but why I also play a long-term world, in that everything has been crafted, especially in my areas. I mean, there's more of us on the server than just me, but in my specific areas, or things that I've had a hand in, they look just the way I want them, or at least to the best of my ability at the time. And I feel like that level of control, and that might be the artist in me as well. And like, when you're controlling a drawing, or you're trying to get it to look the way that you want, when you do that thing where you're happy with it and you step away from it, you go, yeah, that's done. And I there's that level of control, I think, is something that really appeals to Minecraft. But I've never been pulled to the survival side of Minecraft. I've never done a hardcore world. I think I've mentioned a number of times on this show that I'm not a big fan of the early gameplay in Minecraft, and I kind of want to get past it as soon as I can, because I more enjoy like the exploring and the building and that aspect of it. So it's funny that I don't necessarily get attached to like the Minecraft world, like the generation. That might change as I do more exploration in 119 though, because I do find that those features are really cool. And you do, much to the, tip of the hat to the Mojang crew, when you find a dripstone cave like the one that I found on the Abba caving run on Friday, like part of me was a little sad that this wasn't something I was going to be building in. Like, I found this amazing thing, and it was just like, I am here to destroy it. Like, I'm here to rip the minerals out of it as fast as I can. I'm trying not to look around. And part of me was just reminding myself, like, oh, I'm on a timer. Like, I need to move on. While the other part of me is like, wow, look at this place. And you're kind of like stopping and looking around. And I feel like that kind of stuff, with the uniqueness of 119 not development, generation, I feel I can see people getting even attached just to the world, like not even something you've built, but just like an area, a unique biome, or a unique setup where you've got this special rare, it's that term I feel is thrown around a lot these days, but like you've got that rare combination of biomes and caves and structures that you're just kind of like, this is fantastic. I've got so many ideas. And if you then lose that, I can see that being a real problem, because it isn't even something that you built, right? Like it's something that was a random generation.
Yeah.
I guess you'd have the seed that you could always try it again, but
yeah, but it doesn't feel the same. Like it's the other thing I was thinking about during this concept was like a Minecraft world is like a canvas that we're constantly adding to, and sometimes even by subtracting from it. In the case of like the fact that you've gone in and ripped out all of the resources from a dripstone cave and going into deep slate and whatnot, like that still tells a story. That's still, an experience that you had, and maybe part of it is like the memories of those experiences and keeping those with us and thinking, oh, that I remember when we built that together, and that's kind of like a human connection that you've made with somebody. But even individual worlds, like it's an artistic effort, even by subtracting from it. If you're someone who likes to dig giant holes, you are still having an impact on the world, and it feels like you're doing something with that blank canvas. And to lose a world that you've put that artistic effort into, you feel like a painter losing their work in a house fire. Like recreating it seems, if not necessarily impossible, then sometimes it can feel kind of more hollow. Like the brushstrokes don't fall the same way again. You're not going to find the same thing about a world that you found previously, and that initial spark of inspiration is not going to be there in the same way. I think it would take a different mindset to really go, well, I could reproduce absolutely everything that I did before and feel content in doing that. It also comes from something that you touched on earlier, chasing that idea of a project being finished. And I think that's quite rare in Minecraft circles. Like, I don't, aside from people who build set pieces, creative builds, whatever, like I feel like even in survival, I don't recall many times when I really felt like a project was done. There will always be something about it that I could have changed, something I could have made better, lessons that I've learned along the way that I would rebuild the stuff that I built again, except for the idea that that is sunk cost in a way. There will always be places in the world that we haven't discovered and builds left unfinished. And so if you lose a Minecraft world before you feel like it's fulfilled its potential in that way, that can also be something that's, emotionally affecting in one way or another.
Yeah, I think comparing it creatively to something like art, there's definitely a parallel. Like as a professional illustrator, you've done that thing where you've forgotten to save recently and the file crashes, or worse, something has happened and the file is corrupt. It doesn't happen nearly as often these days as it did like early in my career when technology wasn't up to snuff, or Photoshop didn't have autosave, back then. And you'd be frustrated and like really disheartened, especially with anything creative. If you're doing it at that kind of level, then there's a certain flow. There's a certain, I call them happy accidents, like there's a certain gesture of your hand that got you just the line that you wanted. And recreating that is going to be really difficult because you no longer even have a reference to look at as to how you got there, because it was your original thing. And I feel like there's something similar in Minecraft. When you reach a certain level in Minecraft in terms of your familiarity with the game, and you start to just kind of like flow and like, I'll create hallways and like, oh, this is a cool place for an alleyway in my town. And if I lost, something happens where the server got corrupted, and I have backups. So back up your worlds, folks. If you have the ability to do it, do it.
Yes, that's a holiday PSA from me and Joel to you. Back up your worlds this Christmas.
Very easy to do on a server. All you have to do is just go into your admin section and download the world and just like rename it something and tuck it on your computer or an external hard drive somewhere, and do it that way. If it's really important, then make a copy and give it to a friend as well. But stuff like that, I feel like when you lose that kind of progress, like going back into Minecraft, and Minecraft is more specific in that because of the blocky nature of it, like you could recreate the thing. But like you said, I would not find the same joy in recreating it. And unless I had a recording, like, I mean, you and I have the advantage of like, if we're doing something on Twitch, or if you're recording something for YouTube, then like, even if you lost the world, if you still had the video file, like you could really go back and see block for block what you were doing and recreate it. And that would be, something potentially time saving. Or I guess in your case, you'd also have, depending on the build, you might have like Matica, like you might have lost a build, like in halfway through a light Matica build, you could just take the template again and just start from scratch. It's a pain, and no one likes doing the exact same thing that they just did over again. I have that happen sometimes if I'm editing a podcast and Premiere crashes or like whatever it is. Like redoing something that you just did creatively is annoying. I find that for me, my attachment to the Citadel is, I find it's hinging a lot on that I don't want to start over, and that early part of the game is not something I necessarily enjoy as much. And because we've put in so much work over the last 5 years on the Citadel, like all of the infrastructure that we would have starting over would be gone. Now, on one hand, the positive there is that you'd have a clean slate and you could do all kinds of things. You could do things differently. You could take a look at the mistakes that you've made and maybe move on from there. But for me, it's just stuff that we've already done. And my kind of like grip on the Citadel is that I don't want to start over. If I want to start over experience, I could RP that. I could just like leave all my stuff behind and go 1,000 blocks or 10,000 blocks in a certain direction and pretend to start over. But I think that part of that view, which differs greatly from the sentimentality that you're talking about, is because as a content creator, Minecraft quickly moved from a hobby into a big part of my job. And I've always had that separation. And I think it comes from being, not criticized is the wrong word, but having like reviews and revisions as an animator. You just kind of quickly learn that nothing is precious in your professional work. So stuff that I drew at work, I would do my best, but I wouldn't care about it as much as something that I drew at home.
Sure.
And
yeah.
so if I lost a file at work, well, it's fine. It sucks. I might have to stay late and fix it, but it's not the end of the world. Or if someone says, this isn't working very well, I need you to reanimate it so it's better, I wouldn't be that hurt about it, because like I'm doing, it's making a product, and it's got a different emotional attachment to it when it is for work. And part of me working from home for as long as I have, I start to think about things in Minecraft as work. As fun as it is, I'm not knocking it. I don't drag myself to work every day. I get to play Minecraft for work a lot of the time, which I enjoy immensely. But if something were to happen and I was to lose something, it was like, all right, well, I guess we just move on. Like I would be angry. I wouldn't be sad. you know?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I would just like, all right, but like at the same time, I would pick up and move on straight away because it's the next step. That's just what you do when you're plugging away at a job. And I giant air quotes there because again, it's very, very fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think we often end up focusing more on this sort of intangible destination than the fun we're having along the way. But I think if you can separate that out, if you can be like, well, the product here is a fun time, rather than it being like some kind of finished Minecraft world that you're like, I am done with this. This is a project I can move on from. Then it starts to make more sense. But yeah, the idea that we put enough time and effort into something that to lose it as a product of that time and effort, that feels like a sincere loss. That feels like, well, I was working towards that and now it's just been annihilated. Like that's something that's difficult for a lot of people to reckon with. And the one thing I want to round this off with is saying that there is certainly room for a lot of people to consider both angles of that. Like you look at people like Agnes Larson, who is now the gameplay lead, like the game director of Minecraft, and is still holding on to a world that she's had for 10 years, that she probably, plays with family and has all of these memories held onto through that world. And it's become such a key part of Minecraft's sort of prime directive, as it were, to make sure that future updates are going to be compatible with worlds from the past. That even when the terrain was changing in huge ways in 1.18, they understand that these worlds mean enough to people that they want to make sure that nothing they do changes that. Or if it does, it changes it for the better and it improves stuff around what people have already built because the stuff within those boundaries is precious to people. And that's something to hold on to. And once again, a PSA from us, back up your worlds. But that's where we're going to leave it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, folks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can participate in live show recordings as they happen, and stuff like monthly Minecraft audio hangouts, the next one of which, as I said at the top of the show, will be happening in January. We're currently at 326 patrons, which is down 14 from last week. First of the month Patreon processing still going through. And if you're interested in, giving yourself an early Christmas present, then consider becoming a patron. Special thanks, of course, go to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz. Thank you so much for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just tell a friend about The Spawn Chunks and that they can listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. Be sure to leave us a rating and a review on your favorite platform. And you can email the show, which is separate from a review, at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I've been mostly working on Empires Season 2, dabbling in a bit of YouTube shorts here and there. Would love to know what you think. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Quick links to everything are on joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. Talked a lot about Wednesday, the new show on Netflix this past week. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where Fridays we are building the Back to the Future time machine in Lego, and on weekends we are playing Minecraft, and over the holidays expect some extra streams.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but there's no place like Spawn.